This is Radio Hereford FC, the home of the Bulls. Proud broadcasters of Hereford Football Club. What happens to the Bulls happens here. Every game, every week. Hereford Football Club, we know how you feel about it, because we feel the same. Matchday Live. This is Radio Hereford FC, the home of the Bulls.
Well, good evening everybody and welcome along to Radio Hereford FC wherever you are listening worldwide, everywhere apart from China we can reach, which is more than can be said for the BBC, and we've got a representative from the BBC with us tonight. We'll go into that a little bit later on. We are live from the Excelsior in Lytham Road, Blackpool, Friday Night Live in Blackpool. We've already availed ourselves of Wetherspoons and Harry Ramsden's, but now we're in the Excelsior to talk to Blackpool Supporters Trust. And if you know anything about Blackpool Supporters Trust out there, if you've read any of our links over the last week, you'll know that they are going through problems similar but not identical to the ones we've faced in recent years, and Keith will explore that a little bit later on. We're joined by Keith Hall, as I've already said, well known to Hereford supporters as the voice of BBC Radio Hereford and Worcester commentaries, founder of Radio Hereford FC, and fundraising coordinator of Hereford United Supporters Trust. So we've got a big wig with us there. Welcome, Keith. Good evening to you.
I'll doff my wig too.
Can I borrow your wig sometime? I could do it, won't you? And Christine Seddon is chairperson of Blackpool Supporters Trust, a long-standing champion of the trust. Christine stepped into the role in July and has already witnessed big changes in the fortunes of the trust, particularly over the last few weeks. Welcome to you, Christine.
Hello, thank you for asking me on.
Oh, not a problem at all. Well, while in Blackpool, we've all got to look at your trust, haven't we? There are others with us as well, and we get to them later. A sprinkling of Hereford FC fans who are with us here for the FA Cup tie at Fleetwood tomorrow. The biggest, well, I was going to say the biggest match in our history. We're only 3 years old as a club, but I still think the FA Vase final at Wembley in the first season was the biggest game in our history so far, but the result wasn't, unfortunately. But we're bringing, I think, in excess of 1,000 fans up from Hereford tomorrow for the Fleetwood tie, and Keith will give us a bit of build-up to that after we have a break a little bit later on. Joni is going to explain how listeners out there can actually join in interactively with us.
Good evening, everybody. We've got several ways in which you can join in tonight. I will take your tweets using the hashtag Tangerine Bulls, or leave a post on the Facebook event on Radio Hereford Live from Blackpool, and we will find you on Radio Hereford Facebook page and put your questions in, and we'll take them and put them out there for you.
That would be really good. We like that hashtag Tangerine Bulls. We thought that was quite a good one to have. Okay, I just want to, before I hand over to Keith, who's going to have a word with Christine, I'm going to ask them in a minute to give a brief summary of what's happened in our respective trusts over the last 7 years or so, because in 2010 Blackpool were a Premier League side, and in 2010 we were just about hanging on to being a Football League side, and things have changed for both clubs dramatically since then. Now, it's well documented that both clubs have undergone major upheavals in recent years, so for the benefit of Hereford listeners, I'm going to ask Christine to give a brief outline of the comings and goings of Blackpool since the giddy heights of Premier League football in 2010. So, Christine, For the benefit of Hereford supporters, please do fill us in.
Right, I'll do my best to do this, the short version, but such a lot has happened.
I know.
In fact, can I remember it all? I will say briefly that the Oystons took over 30 years ago, and Blackpool fans have not been happy with them really almost from the moment they took over. So for those who think that we've only got unhappy since the Premier League, that's not the case. As has come out in a recent court case, the club has always been run for their benefit and not for ours. But back in 2006, 2007, Valery Belakon came and invested in Blackpool. He's a Latvian banker and businessman, and it was his money that and his investment that got us to the Premier League in the first place. Once we got to the Premier League, this was absolutely incredible. He said we'd do it in 5 years. We actually did it in 4. And you can imagine it was just like all our birthdays had come at once. We'd won the footballing lottery. This victory to get us there should really have secured our future. And we often talk about legacy. Where is the legacy? Unfortunately, the monies that came into the club on the back of that, instead of being invested in the club, have been utilised by the Oystons mainly for their other businesses. That's the sort of short version. And this is what has made Blackpool fans extremely unhappy. We were relegated by 1 point from the Premier League, and a lack of investment. We didn't expect ridiculous money to be spent, but we did expect them to have a go at it. So to find that in the season that we were relegated from the Premier League, Owen Oyston had actually paid himself £11 million, which is a staggering sum of money, and I believe in the whole of football nobody has ever paid themselves that much money. So while we're being relegated for the want of maybe 1 or 2 key players being signed, he'd taken all that money. I have to say that none of this is that the moving of money around your companies is not illegal, but from our perspective, this money was football money. It was intended for the football club and should have been spent on the football club, and simply has not. That didn't happen. Sadly, we then sort of started to slip down the divisions, not immediately, but then we lost Ian Holloway, then we went through 6th, and we went to our 6th manager in the space of a few years. But what really pushed people over the edge was as the accounts started to be published and it became obvious where this money was going, while the club was deteriorating, while we still had no training facilities, etc., we started complaining. Some fans on message boards or whatever perhaps spoke a little bit out of turn, and then the next thing is that the owners are then suing some of their own fan base. Quite frankly, that was the line crossed, and for people who hadn't decided to boycott at that point, I think that really was what pushed most people to say, do you know what, enough is enough. So really, since the end of the 2015 season, the majority of people have boycotted home games. The Not a Penny More campaign was up and running, which meant spending absolutely no money that would go into the Oystons' pockets, including even going to away games. We can only go if it's pay on the gate. And this basically is where we've ended up. Luckily for us, and it is lucky, Valery Belakon, who had a 20% share in the club, has been able to take them to court. He's brought a private legal action for unfair prejudice, and he has won it. Incredibly, he was awarded £31.27 million. It just rolls off the tongue. And we do believe now that this is the end of the Oystons because it has damaged them to such a degree. So that, coupled with the Not a Penny More, which means that the football club is losing money hand over fist, is like a financial tsunami that is finally sweeping them away. But it's incredibly sad that we've had to rely on a private businessman bringing a private legal action to get something done. We, the fans, as stakeholders in our club, have absolutely nowhere to go. We have no judge, we have no referee. The football authorities have been worse than useless. I'm sure you know all about that.
FA.
FA, EFL. So, we're just absolutely ecstatic that this court case has gone the way of Mr. Bellicon, who is a very sympathetic man, and we do hope that he will continue to be involved with the club and maybe will take the club over. That is the outcome I think that we'd all like.
Can I just ask a quick question about an appeal? Was there a possibility of an appeal? Has that been thrown out?
The judge said refused them an appeal, so their only option was to go to the Court of Appeal, which of course costs even more money, but I believe it's only on certain points from the ruling that they're intending to appeal.
And have the family got that amount of money, or can they only do it through the sale of the club?
We don't think they've got that kind of money. There is a fire sale going on at the moment of Oyston properties. They actually have until Monday, the 4th of December, to provide the first £10 million.
They'll probably get stuck in traffic.
We'll come to that in a minute. We'll come to that in a minute. Yeah.
Sorry about that. I just thought I'd throw that in.
Okay, well,
in a suitcase.
Yeah, that's probably a good point now to say. That's a really nice summary, Christine. Thank you very much. That was almost exactly 5 minutes.
Ooh.
Well, that was very good. Very good. Now Keith here, for the benefit of Blackpool supporters, and we know there are some listening out there, and there may even be some in here, for the benefit of Blackpool supporters, can you give the same sort of resume of what's happened at Hereford?
In a word, that was extremely a very, very good summary. No, I think really, as far as Hereford are concerned, we ought to really look at quickly having got back into the Football League. Blackpool supporters may not realise Graham Turner took over the club, and he was chairman for something like 15 years. Hereford were relegated in 1997 after drawing against Brighton. Hereford went down with the same points as Brighton. They had to win that game, unfortunately, because the only year the Football League have ever had goals scored as the reason by which you could get relegated if you were level on any other goal average, that
goal difference.
Difference, Hereford would have stayed up. Anyway, that really focused attention on what Hereford's debts were. Peter Hill, who was the chairman at the time, tried to struggle on, took loans out with. Oh, it's always development, isn't it? It's always leases. Took loans out, backed on to leases on the ground, which incidentally weren't Hereford companies anyway. It's a council-owned football ground, but still managed to secure first £500,000, which doesn't sound too much these days, and another £500,000 on top of that. So Hereford started their rebirth, if you like, in the non-league football with £1 million debt around the neck. Peter Hill lasted about another year and eventually sold out. I think he asked for tenders for people to come in, a group of 4 or 5 tried to buy his shares from him, but they had to sign confidentiality agreements, and it became very protracted, and they weren't really able to disclose too much to the supporters, and so their actual bid failed. They were all local businessmen at the time. So Graham Turner himself, as a manager, which is quite unbelievable, at the time took the onus upon himself to manage the club and be the acting chair for a while. I think he hopes that some other people would come forward again, but miraculously, after 9 years in the Vauxhall Conference, as it was in those days, Hereford secured a playoff position at Walker Stadium, Leicester. They beat Halifax in that playoff final to get back into the Football League, still with £1 million debt. But the club had made profits for 6 consecutive years under Graham Turner as manager and chairman, which again is unheard of, really, especially in non-league football. So Hereford got back into the Football League, got into League One again, with very little money, really. Crowds were up, but not substantially. But sold the club to David Keat and to Tim Russon, who some people might know as a TV presenter at the time, which that combination only lasted about 6 or 8 months, unfortunately. I think there were problems and issues and arguments between the two. It wasn't really working. Hereford was struggling. They stayed up the first year, but a second successive relegation fight was just too much. We came out of League One and we were virtually at the bottom of League Two straight away, and it was a real struggle. And as we then know, Hereford got relegated back into the conference. I think the thing that really I can appreciate the big major impact between the two, and the affinity between Blackpool and Hereford, is the boycott. Hereford supporters eventually had to boycott the club. The chairman would not sell to the supporters. He made it perfectly clear that he wasn't prepared to do that. An offer went in to buy the club for £1 and still take on the debts. Comment from the chairman at the time, who I know was asked to resign on the board of directors on 4 separate occasions by other members of the board to try and make it work. Hereford had stayed up from getting relegated from the conference on the very last day of the season. Away at Aldershot, they won the game and on points had secured their status at that level. Unfortunately, the chairman would then not sell to the supporters. I've got a better offer. That better offer turned out to be £2 and not £1. He sold it to people who both had criminal records. The owners and directors test that you've referred to, and a lot of people are still referring to this, and we all want, as from Supporters Trust to ordinary supporters up and down the country, we need the Football Association to get a real grip and prevent people coming in to football who have got criminal records. I'm sorry, it doesn't really stand up to me that anybody can come in, whatever they've done in the past. It seems to be completely ignored. You're allowed to come in, and even if they come in and then are found out to have problems, 4 months down the line the damage is already done. So something needs to be done. So that's the situation. We ended up in the hands of people who really were not, I don't care what anybody tells me, personally I don't believe that they had any interest in the football club. It's all about the leases, it's all about development. Predominantly people come in from outside and they don't normally have any affinity with the football club, the football supporters, the community, and they will try and look for a fast buck, and that's what they were after. Luckily the council were not budging on the development of 2 ends of the ground, and the supporters had to boycott because the people who were running the club, it was just becoming an absolute joke, in my opinion, and that I'll always stay that way. I never went into the ground from the moment they took over to the moment they left. I was asked to report for BBC Hereford and Worcester, and I was prepared to, but I was only prepared to do so from the protest, from outside of the ground and not inside of the ground. That was not Hereford United Football Club. It was some renegade club. I think 63 mercenaries, some of which didn't understand what was going on as players. They came in to play for the club. They thought they were going to get, a chance of getting a career and making their progress back up. They were sleeping inside the club on bunk beds. They weren't put up anywhere. It was an absolutely horrendous time, and we had to somehow find a way of removing them or them agreeing to put it back as it should have been, and that's with the supporters. Luckily, since then, the boycott worked, but in the most horrible way. The club had to be liquidated before they could go. There was no other way that I could see it was ever going to turn the right corner. We had to make a stand, and that was the stand that was made. Some people say, why was a club or a limited company set up in the background ready? Well, that's the whole point. It was ready so that when something went wrong, which was inevitable in most people's eyes, there was a limited company ready. Okay, it was cost what, £2 to register a company, so it's not too underhand, is that? It's just forward thinking.
Well, it's exactly the same amount of money that they paid for the club.
We need something ready, and then anyway, a group of businessmen have come together since the club was liquidated in December 2014. We started again. It's 50% fans owned in terms of supporters own money, but all of the directors are actually Hereford supporters as well, so you end up with the supporters, a fan owned club. Some people are very pernickety and they'll look at that and say no, it's not 100% supporters run. I'm not absolutely sure 100% supporters run clubs work to any great degree in longevity anyway. So we are where we are. We have 50%, or the target for the supporters is to raise 50% of the share capital over a 5-year period to match fund the benefactors who've put the money in to set the club up. Fantastic since we started. 2 successive promotions. We were playing in the Midland Football League. Some clubs have less than 100 supporters. We were taking 500, 600, 700 to Midland Football League games. It's unheard of. We got to the FA Vase final in the very first year. 3 trophies in the first, or 4 trophies was it in the first year. We then won the Southern League South and West, and we now find ourselves in the Southern League Premier, which is exactly where the crooks and criminals had taken us when they took over the club. And I quite happily say crooks and criminals, they both have criminal records.
Absolutely. Well, I think the thing that's sort of slightly left out there, that because they wouldn't pay a bond to the football conference,
Correct.
we were relegated 2 divisions.
Yeah. And they would have had that money back.
Yes, and then when we were liquidated, the FA rules say we had to be relegated another 2 divisions, and therefore we actually dropped 4 divisions in one fell swoop. And we've clawed back the first 2 of those in 2 seasons. The target that the club set was they wanted 3 promotions in 5 years. Well, we've had 2 in 2, so you know things are going well. But I mean that's the role of the Supporters Trust cannot be understated. I
just want to go back to the boycott though, Frank, because people, I mean, I watched a video, it was quite a decent documentary about Blackpool. People who went to Wembley, about 37,000 went to Wembley to watch Blackpool get into the Premier League. I think it was 5,000 who went to Wembley to see them get promoted back into League One. And the difference in the attitude of people, even those that were being interviewed that went to watch Blackpool, and the naive way that they were talking, and I could see so many parallels with, you know, it probably, I don't know, is it an 80% level at which support the club still, or sorry, 80% boycott and 20% still go, something of that sort of average. Well, that seemed to be the case.
Yeah.
You know, for Hereford, it's certainly right at the start. And you wonder how much, I know it's painful, but I think you had to go through it. And we had to pay the ultimate sacrifice, and that was at the club, or sorry, the limited company go. I don't think you ever kill a football club, you kill the limited company. It's a business at the end of the day, and if it's not being run correctly, any business will fall. And if Blackpool are in that situation, then they would have to fall and start again. I thought AFC Blackpool, just as a quick aside, as a Hereford fan, you look from the outside and you see AFC Blackpool, I thought, oh, they've started that up, but it's actually not, is it?
No,
Christy told me that.
No,
it used to be a mechanics institute.
Yes, that's right, yes.
So I got the wrong end of the stick there, because I thought, oh, they're already doing it just in case, but it's not.
No, it isn't. And I think we've always been extremely confident that ultimately we would get our club back, so that there hasn't been much appetite for setting up a Phoenix club, if you like. I mean, it might have come to that, who knows, but thankfully it would appear that that's not going to be the case. But can I ask, how long did you guys have to actually boycott for?
It was 1 season, and they folded within 5 months, I think, at the start of the season. The first game, their alleged gate was about 500 or 600. And put that into context, Hereford's average is now around about 2,800 for home gates.
Yeah, that was in the Midland League. We were getting 2,800 as well.
And how many actually paid was another sub question of those. And I think it tailed off. There were probably less than 150 for some of the games right at the very end. But you know, the player turnover, it was just. One person said to me, I won't name him, and he said they're good potential, that team. I said, it wasn't a team. There were 63 odd players. That's not a team. They weren't there for the long run.
To be fair to the players, I don't hold anything against the players. They were promised a dream. They were kids, basically, good kids, ex-academy kids. You know, they get kicked out of academies at the age of 19. They're offered to go and play in the initially it was going to be conference football. They were sold a dream, and they were let down just as badly as we were. Got nothing against the players at all. It certainly wasn't their fault or their making. They were promised a dream, and they were sold down the river just like the rest of us were.
So from our perspective, we look at Blackpool and we think, you know, thank God you've got some legal recourse,
yes, absolutely,
which never happened with Hereford.
No.
So you hopefully the ownership turns out as you wish, and you're able then to involve the supporters more. I think it's not more about fans' representation on the board; it's supporters actually taking responsibility. Because to me, it's just as big a director's job. You're not there just to be some token gesture.
No.
You have to take responsibility for certain areas within the football club if your football club acts with a different range of directors, some private and some from the supporters base, and that's what I think is the way forward.
Indeed.
But I just have so much respect for the people who've worked so hard at Blackpool to try and turn this absolute, it's just a total mess.
I think what's been so inspiring, though, is the way fans have come together and the wider football family, and we've had so much support from so many football clubs, because at the end of the day, this is our game, and I think the tide's turning in that fans are starting to realise that, we do actually have power. So like you said, that the boycotting your own team is the hardest thing that any football fan ever has to do. We shouldn't have to do it.
No.
But it's pretty much the only power that we have. But it is very, very powerful if you can get enough people to do it consistently enough, which obviously you managed to do. We've certainly managed to do it here at Blackpool. But it shouldn't be like that, and that's why really we need to look at the wider aspect of the game and football governance, etc. I don't know if you are all aware of the Fans Not Numbers campaign that was started in September. And it was launched here in Blackpool. Phase 2 is due to start soon because we really need to push on with it. But asking the football authorities to self-regulate, it's people say, isn't it? It's like asking turkeys don't vote for Christmas. So we really do need some like an independent regulatory body to come in and sort this out, because it shouldn't be a matter of potluck. We're obviously delighted that the Oystons have put the club up for sale, and it looks like they are literally on their way out the door.
Are you worried, though, that might be sold to more of the same?
Well, frankly, could there possibly be more of the same? I don't think so.
Well,
Really,
that's what we thought. That's what we thought when David Keats sold the club,
Yeah, true. So this is of course the worry. We hope that we'll get somebody decent in, but there's no guarantees, is there? And that's the point.
I suppose logically, the only person that they could logically sell it to would be Valerie Bellicon himself.
Well, this is very much what I think most Blackpool fans are hoping for, and I would suggest he's in pole position to acquire the club if he wants it, and we've no reason to think he doesn't want it. But again, he will probably want to come in with somebody else, another investor, maybe multiple investors, who knows. So it's still up in the air. As a trust, we are looking at all sorts of different things, possibilities of acquiring shares ourselves on behalf of the fans. These are all things that we're looking at actively at the moment, but
what you want, you just want to be included, don't you? Basically, that's what it boils down to.
And we believe that fans need to be at the heart of the football club, and we're very determined that that's what's going to happen with Blackpool, aren't we, guys?
So I've just read here that it might not be 31.27 million, because with interest and costs, the likely sum to be paid by the Oystons to be over £40 million.
Well, there was an earlier case, because Mr Bellicon also had an investment in the South Stand at Bloomfield Road. So there was a case last December which he won, which was about £3 million including costs. So yes, when you put it all together, it's even more. It's staggering sums of money, isn't it? Really, it's
absolutely.
Fantastic.
We've got a question in here, and you may not be up to date with this information, but Keith will know more about this. We've had a question in here saying to our Twitter, to Tangerine Bulls, any advice for Merthyr Town FC from either Blackpool or HFC or Hust with their current situation? Keith, you might have to praise people of the Merthyr Town situation. They are a Southern Premier side like ourselves.
Yeah, well, they've had to release all of their players and have literally no playing cost for a few weeks, I think, to get to the bottom of what the actual debt is, what the cash crisis really is. There's been fantastic support from, again, supporters all around the country trying to back them to get them out of some money. My own concern would be, what is the level of the debt? What is the real bottom of the bucket?
Well, the problem they've got that is a fan-owned club,
yes.
In theory. It is a fan-owned club, and something has gone terribly wrong there.
Well, they've all resigned,
yes.
As far as I'm aware.
Well, you see, I don't like to criticise other clubs, but you've got the same sort of situation that's beginning to occur at FC United now, Manchester, where they're totally fan-owned clubs, and the last 2 AGMs, they've completely changed the board.
Yes.
Because the fans said, no, we don't like you lot, we're going to vote in another 12 instead. And then they say, oh, another 12 instead.
It is a democracy, so that
exactly.
is perfectly
but of course,
legal.
Yes, but the people, what suffers in the end is the club overall suffers because now they're struggling, because it always rubs off onto the playing side at the end of the day, doesn't it? So this model of a completely fan-owned club, personally, I don't think can ever work, because at some point you're going to need investment. And that investment isn't going to come out of the fans. You need an investor to invest. And I think our model of having benefactors who own half the club and the trust who own the other half of the club is something that can.
I'm not always
but
sure
even then,
it has to be the percentage. It just has to be the responsibility that supporters actually take and work within, with private investors to make something work. It's like any other company in that degree. I mean, you have to. I think Dulwich Hamlet, another club that they're trying to work. Ebbsfleet was another one, which was all supporters from around the world chipped in to buy shares, as I'm aware, in Ebbsfleet. Used to be Gravesend and Northfleet. They've had problems, but are turning things around, I think. So I don't think there is that's the model. It always works. I don't think you'll ever get to that scenario.
No, because
it works in your own community.
Yeah, we're in a funny community, though, aren't we? Because we're sort of isolated. We're cut off from the rest of civilization almost. It's always
we've got 17 fingers.
Yes.
Yeah. we always tell somebody from Hereford.
Hereford is at the end of a 30-mile long cul-de-sac. A bit like Barrow, really. And it's one way in and one way out. But that isolated nature can be a benefit, because it means our fan base is very strong. It's small, but it's very strong, because it's sort of a community thing. I mean, our fans come from, in Radnorshire and Monmouthshire and bits of Shropshire and Worcestershire.
I think an exile level is big because of the history of the football club.
Well, yeah, those people don't know. We're getting 700 or 800 people listen to our radio broadcast. A lot of whom are abroad. We've got people all over the world. Andy Prosser is here somewhere. Where's Andrew? Is he here?
He's probably still drinking champagne.
He was here.
He was. We'll have to have a word with him. Oh,
here he is.
Here he is. Well, Andy listens to us from all over the world. You live in Panama City, Andy does, yeah. But quite often you'll say, oh, I'm with my mates round a laptop in Lithuania listening to you today. I'm on an aircraft now. The Suez Canal? No, Reykjavik you've done. But he's flown in for this one. Champagne, was it, on Heathrow to Manchester? And then you had to catch a bus from Preston. Well, there you go, you see. How might you... Yeah. But you don't miss a match, do you? No, you don't. Well, it's Hereford cattle have gone all over the world, and Hereford people have gone with them, basically. There's a lot in the Midwest, the States, Australia, New Zealand, sort of, and the farming communities there. Have we got anything else to...
We've got a question here. Is 3G the future for smaller football clubs?
I hate the surface. I don't like watching football on it. I have seen quite a number of games. We saw recently Oxford City in the FA Trophy. We've got Merthyr to come. I think Slough Town's probably one of the better, more recent surfaces. I hated the one when we played in the FA Cup last year.
Sutton Coldfield
Town. And what was the first tie at the same ground?
Romulus.
Doesn't work, and I am worried about... I mean, I suppose I've been a bit overcritical, but you never really know about the poison within the rubber. Carcinogenic,
yeah, that's right. It's all car tires, isn't it? Just shredded up.
There have been legal cases, especially in America, where they've had a lot of 3G.
But for small clubs at non-league level,
you can see
can
the benefit.
Well, Merthyr, I can't understand why they've got into such trouble, because the community use of that is practically every day of the week. Local colleges are using it, and I know that one at Seddon Coldfield, Aston Villa ladies play there, and whatever. So they must be making income. So why the clubs cannot survive on that, particularly the level they're playing at, I really just can't.
I think we'll see it in the Football League. I think it was one vote in the last Football League AGM that prevented surfaces coming in the Football League. I can see benefits, but I can see disadvantages. I don't like watching football, and it's not like the old days of Luton and QPR Loftus Road when the ball was bouncing head height. It was just ridiculous. But it has improved. But personally, I think people do slip. You get horrible injuries. Jamie Cuss, Hereford player, was basically, his anterior.
Well, that was
12 months out.
That was 14 months ago, and he's just making a comeback now. He's gone out on loan to a local lower league side there to play. But it's career finishing in most cases. But that was Hereford supporters getting together then to pay his because at our level, there's no medical insurances. The PFA don't cover that sort of thing then, so he had to pay for it out of his own pocket. He's just a self-employed plumber. Is his day job, but then we put out a Just Giving fund, and we raised the money for what did we raise? £10,000. £10,000 in just under a week to pay for his treatment. And the club said, okay, you're paying for that, pay for the treatment. We will give him a chance of staying on. We'll not release him. And they've kept right, and he's now gone out on loan to try and get his fitness back. But that's been 14 months. And he's in his 30s. Now if surfaces like that are going to do that to players, and he's always said to us, a number of times, it was that surface that did it. The ground just did not give, and as it was, the injury, and it's at our level, it's career finishing really, because people just can't afford to pay those sort of things. And as I say, there's no medical insurances at that level. They've got to take, because they're self-employed doing other jobs, they have to take out their own medical insurance because they're part-time players.
Blackpool's pitch was something else that we complained about, because here's this cash-rich club that had all this money come in, and then the state of our pitch over not so much the last couple of seasons, but before that was shocking. And again, potentially career-ending injuries because of the state of it. So it happens at all levels that pitches are very, very important, aren't they?
Absolutely. Well, I think that's a pretty good summary of where we all are at the moment. I think in the short amount of time we've got left, because I'm very much aware that the filed match, which is only just down the road here, isn't it?
It is.
Is on the big screen behind us with no sound. It's still 0-0. Proof it's 12 minutes and 34 seconds gone in the first half, proving that we're going out live. This is not a recording if you're watching the match at home. Although I might have been out with the seconds because there's a 20-second delay on our broadcast. That's just in case Keith says anything and I'll complete. No, that's not. And that just about wraps it up from Blackpool. Thanks to Christine Seddon and the Blackpool Supporters Trust for having us. We wish you well in your endeavours. Do keep in touch. You must come down to Hereford and visit us, and we'll do the same again down there. It'd be rather nice. You might have you're not going to boycott us. You can come and swell our crowd to 2,803 perhaps. That would be quite nice. Thanks to the Excelsior for letting us interrupt their evening's entertainment, and the good people of Blackpool for coming and supporting us as well, and the Hereford people who've made the trip. Thanks for listening. Have a good journey tomorrow if you're coming. If not, join us on air from about 2 p.m. for all the build-up to the big match. Greg Davis and Jamie Griffiths are the team tomorrow, picking the big games again, as they always do. But for now, from Blackpool with Keith Hall, night from Keith Hall, and from Joni.
Good night.
Thanks for looking after the Twitter feed there. From all of us at Radio Hereford FC, a very good night to you.
Matchday Live. This is Radio Hereford FC, the home of the Bulls.